Hello, everyone, I'm Rebecca, your narrator. Today's story dives into the challenges I've faced, particularly with my mother-in-law, Emma. She's the type who loves to take charge and often crosses boundaries my husband, Anthony, and I have set, despite us reminding her. Admittedly, we haven't always enforced these limits, which has allowed Emma to influence our lives far more than we intended. While she wasn't outright rude or disapproving, she frequently found subtle ways to show her dissatisfaction with me, from critiquing my style to even commenting on Anthony's choices. The list of ways she's disregarded our wishes is long, but one of the most memorable examples was our wedding. Emma took it upon herself to change nearly every detail, from the decorations and flowers to the cake. We managed to keep the original venue, but otherwise, it felt like we were either agreeing with her choices or losing money. Each time we confronted her, she'd insist she had better taste and knew best. Her disregard for our preferences was both frustrating and hurtful. Anthony struggled to confront her, and since he wasn't comfortable with cutting ties, I did my best to ignore her intrusions. For a while, things were manageable, until Emma found new ways to exert her influence. After years of saving, Anthony and I bought our dream home. I loved decorating it to reflect our personalities, but Emma's reaction when she first saw it was far from pleasant. She criticized our choices, calling them cheap and tasteless, and suggested we should have consulted her. Although she offered to improve our home to her taste, we held our ground, firmly expressing that it was our space to design. I share this story hoping to connect with those who might face similar struggles. We can't always control others' actions, but we can decide how we respond and protect what's important to us. I was done with Emma imposing her tastes on our lives, especially in our home. This time, Anthony and I were determined to prevent her interference, despite her persistent texts, calls, and surprise visits. To celebrate buying our home, we planned a short vacation out of state, a much-needed break. With our house left empty, a kind neighbor, an older gentleman, offered to keep an eye on things. We expected a quiet, uneventful trip. Imagine our shock when our neighbor called to report seeing 4 women entering our house. Alarmed, we asked for details, and one woman's description unmistakably matched Emma. Confused and irritated, Anthony and I had to know what was happening. I called Emma right away. "Emma, what are you doing at our house? Our neighbor saw you and some people entering," I said, struggling to keep my tone calm. Her reply was breezy. "Oh, I'm just here with a few friends for 2 weeks, only 4 of us. Don't worry, no wild parties. We thought it'd be nice to spend some quality time together. Plus, your house could use a little care while you're away. Think of it as us house sitting." "But why would you invite people over without telling us, especially while we're away?" I asked, stunned. "Relax, we're just keeping an eye on things," she assured. "With the recent break-ins around here, isn't it better for your home to be occupied? You have valuables, and we wouldn't want anything to go missing, would we?" Though her words had some logic, her method felt intrusive and uncalled for. This was another instance of her disregarding our boundaries, masked as concern for our security. Her nonchalant tone and casual, house-sitting excuse left me suspicious. It was as if she had planned this well in advance. Knowing that she had let herself in unannounced with our spare key made my skin crawl. I couldn't help but feel relieved our neighbor had spotted her and called us, or we might never have known. I was grateful for our neighbor's vigilance, yet my gratitude felt hollow, weighed down by an unsettling feeling I couldn't shake. I shared my concerns with Anthony, explaining how uncomfortable I felt about Emma bringing strangers into our home. Something about it just didn't sit right with me, and I struggled to understand her motives. Anthony took it in stride, suggesting it was a good thing someone was there to keep our home safe, possibly deterring any burglaries. But my worries went beyond security. Emma had a history of overstepping boundaries, and this felt like another glaring instance. Anthony tried to reassure me, promising we'd address it with her once we got home. He acknowledged that he could no longer avoid confronting his mother, especially after this. I understood his difficulty. Emma had raised him alone, but I couldn't help feeling anxious despite his resolve. Then, our neighbor called the next day, amplifying my concerns. He asked if we were still on vacation, and I explained Emma's house-sitting arrangement. His response stopped me cold. He said he'd heard loud noises from inside, not regular sounds of occupancy but what sounded like renovation work. Anthony and I were stunned, struggling to comprehend what Emma could possibly be doing. This revelation brought an unsettling clarity. Emma had long disapproved of my decor choices, often calling them tasteless and insisting she could do better. Her sudden silence on the matter since learning of our getaway now felt ominous. Anthony wondered if perhaps our neighbor had misunderstood, but the neighbor's mention of furniture deliveries and seeing Emma and her friends actively working inside dashed any hopes of that. As it turned out, one of Emma's friends was an interior decorator, an unsettling detail that solidified our suspicions. The thought of her taking it upon herself to improve our home without consent was gut-wrenching. Both Anthony and I were in disbelief, a mix of panic and anger setting in. We thanked our neighbor for his vigilance and assured him that Emma's actions were not authorized, expressing the gravity of the situation. Overwhelmed with frustration and urgency, we prepared to cut our trip short and confront the situation head-on. I declared the vacation over, unable to bear another moment of the getaway under the shadow of this betrayal. Anthony shared my frustration, apologizing repeatedly for his mother's reckless actions and baffled by her decision to involve friends in her unauthorized project. To prevent any further destruction, we faced the difficult choice of involving the authorities. Although the idea of calling the police on Emma was deeply troubling for Anthony, we realized it was necessary to protect our home. With Anthony's reluctant agreement, I requested a welfare check from the police, mentioning unexplained disturbances as reported by our neighbor and noting that my mother-in-law was staying at our house with some guests. Given the recent rise in burglaries, the police took my concerns seriously. The report back was more shocking than we could have imagined. The officers described our home in chaos, with dust and debris from demolition everywhere. My carefully curated decorations were damaged or missing entirely, evidence of the utter disregard for our belongings. When we returned, the reality was even worse than their description, and seeing it firsthand left me inconsolable. Anthony, furious but composed, engaged directly with the officers. He explained that his mother had grossly overstepped by undertaking major changes without permission, leaving us with significant damage. The police sympathized, acknowledging the financial and emotional toll of these unsanctioned renovations. Determined to hold Emma accountable, Anthony and I agreed to pursue charges. The police were supportive, offering to initiate the legal process and promising further documentation of the damage. Until we could return home, we arranged for my sister to monitor the house. Through my anger and distress, Anthony remained resolute, calmly managing each step, a source of strength amid the chaos. He immediately booked our return flights, eager to address the mess Emma had left behind. Once back, we headed straight to the police station, bringing along photos of our home before and after Emma's renovations. The officers, visibly appalled, advised us to take formal legal action. My frustration had reached a peak. I was determined that Emma would face the consequences of her actions. We decided to confront her directly at the station, where she was being held. Her response, a mix of feigned innocence and confusion, was infuriating, as she claimed she'd only been helping by imposing her taste on our home. Anthony, as angered as I was, firmly challenged her, making it clear that her disregard for our wishes and property was unacceptable. It was a moment of reckoning she couldn't escape, and we were resolute in ensuring she understood the severity of her actions. Emma's defense was drenched in entitlement, claiming she'd only been trying to enhance our home, oblivious to the emotional and financial havoc she had caused. She even dared to critique my taste, proposing to fix everything if released, completely missing the gravity of her actions. But we stood firm. We informed her she was no longer welcome in our home, and we were pressing charges for the destruction she had caused. Only then did the reality of legal consequences seem to sink in. Panic washed over her as she turned to Anthony, tearfully casting me as the villain for demanding accountability, pleading for his intervention. Her attempts fell flat. We were resolute in moving forward with legal action, ensuring Emma faced the repercussions of her overreach. Seeing Emma finally grasp the seriousness of her actions was a turning point. Anthony backed me without hesitation. "Mom," he said firmly, "Rebecca's right. By imposing your vision on our home, you've crossed boundaries you shouldn't have. This was too far." He highlighted her disregard for our choices and the breach of trust her actions represented. Despite Emma's emotional appeals and pleas for leniency, Anthony didn't waver, underscoring the financial burden her actions had imposed on us. Faced with the reality of a lawsuit and the strain it would place on her finances, Emma broke down. She had never expected this level of accountability or the potential loss to her savings. But her sudden remorse, laced with complaints about financial hardship, did little to sway us. "You should have thought about the consequences before making these drastic changes," we said, seeing through her last-minute appeals as just another attempt at manipulation. Leaving her at the police station, we went home, braced to rebuild from the mess she had made. Shortly after being released on bail, Emma appeared at our doorstep, uninvited and tearful, hoping to reconcile. Anthony stood his ground, reiterating our boundaries and insisting on no further contact. Emma's attempts to win back favor only reinforced our decision to protect our home and peace from further upheaval. Despite the damage, we decided to remain in our home while awaiting the outcome of the legal proceedings. Ultimately, the court ruled in our favor, mandating substantial compensation from Emma, who narrowly avoided jail but was ordered to cover our legal costs as well. The judge expressed his strong disapproval of her actions, reducing her to tears once more, though our sympathy had long since faded. She was finally facing the consequences of her reckless behavior. Emma's social circle, including the friends who had enabled her scheme, quickly distanced themselves, unwilling to be associated with the fallout. After the court's ruling, Emma tearfully approached us, pleading for forgiveness and lamenting her financial troubles, now worsened by the loss of the support Anthony had once provided. For years, he had given her a monthly allowance, but after this ordeal, he made the difficult decision to cut it off. Emma's appeals only solidified his stance. He emphasized the importance of learning from one's actions, adding that her entitlement had left him no choice. When Emma suggested moving into our guest room to regain financial stability and rebuild trust, our answer was a firm no. Anthony made it clear that she was no longer welcome in our lives, signaling a period of no contact to allow us the space to heal and reevaluate any future relationship with her. Emma's shock and desperation were evident, but, unmoved, we held firm in our decision. In the months that followed, we embraced a newfound peace. Free from Emma's judgment and interference, both Anthony and I felt lighter and more optimistic. This experience led us to consider making this distance permanent, envisioning a future free from her control and drama. Moving forward, we seek support and understanding from those around us, hopeful that this choice will pave the way for the peaceful, fulfilling life we've always wanted.